Hello and welcome to Slammers Weekly. I am Bo Garino. In this episode, myself and my co-host Ben Litt had a chance to sit down with Tony Regina. Tony is the Assistant Communication Director for Gap Golf and has been the voice of Gap since 2009.
We are here at the Riverton Country Club with a special guest, the voice of Gap Golf, Tony Regina. Tony, I feel like you're probably not on the other end of this mic too often.
I am not. This is new territory for me. I appreciate the voice of golf distinction right there because, believe it or not, a lot of people come up to me, oh, Tony Regina, voice of Gap. Tony Regina, voice of Gap. In fact, the other day, I was up at Elkview Country Club for one of our events. Hi, Tony Regina, voice of Gap. So it's a common thing that's thrown my way.
Well, you've been doing it long enough that I think everybody has to know you by now, right?
Yeah, I've been with the organization since 2009. So,
okay.
You know, based on the volume of appearances at events, you know, a lot of supporters and tournament players know me by now, yeah.
It feels longer than that. That's crazy.
It does feel, oh, believe me, it feels longer than that.
I've been playing Gap my whole life, and I don't remember Gap without you, Tony. That makes you feel any better.
It does make me feel better. That must mean I'm doing something right.
I was also stoned all the time. Pre-2008, so maybe that's why.
Did that help you play better, or no?
No, I equally stunk. So how did you get into this role? Did you just originally apply? Or?
That's a great question. So out of college, I graduated from LaSalle in 2005, and I got into the newspaper business. Was fortunate enough to land a job with the Journal-Register company. I don't even know if the company's still in business anymore. The newspaper industry has, as you guys know, come upon some difficult times over the last few years. Regardless, I got into the newspaper industry, was really satisfied to have a career in journalism. That's what I went to school for, and I really enjoyed it. And slowly but surely could see the writing on the wall, right? The ship was sort of sinking. There were things going on with the company that I wasn't too thrilled or keen on. And I happened to come across a listing to join the association's communications department, and I applied and fortunately was brought on board in the winter of 2009, and it's been a happy marriage ever since. Take a lot of pride in being a part of GAP.
Was that a defined role when you came in, or was it more, hey...
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it was a defined role. So there was a predecessor in that position who had just started with the association, I want to say maybe 2006. Marty Emino, who's the director of communications and operations for GAP, he basically built the department from the ground up. Stories I keep hearing with GAP is 2000 is when Mark Peterson, the current executive director, Kirby Martin, director of competitions, and Marty, who, as I mentioned, director of communications and operations, they basically were the GAP staff. Believe it or not, compared to where we are today, they were basically the foundation, staffing-wise, of GAP. So Marty basically created the communications department upon his onboarding with GAP and built it up to the point where he needed an assistant, and that assistant role came in, like I said, I want to say it was 2006-ish, maybe even 2005-ish. But so that assistant communications role was built into the organization when I came on board and basically provided support for the department. It's pretty wild when you think about it. Kirby, Mark, and Marty to where we are now staff-wise, the association has grown tremendously, yeah.
Kirby earned his current role, right? He just, right? He's riding around the club smoking cigars. It's like, Kirby, you did your time, man.
Kirby,
you built this thing.
Kirby is one of a kind. It's amazing the reputation and the recognition he gets from a lot of GAP tournament players, GAP supporters. It's hard to miss Kirby when you're at a GAP event. His presence is pretty well known.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Piggybacking off of that, you joined in 2009. It's now 2023. How have you seen GAP media evolve from something that Marty started 15 odd years ago to now? And I guess, are there any other outside influences that you guys use to do media, or is it GAP's thing, GAP's brand?
It's evolved tremendously. Yes, there are outside media influences that we use to grow. I say that referring to other state and regional, local golf associations throughout the country. We are kind of a united front in certain ways, so we will draw on some neat concepts, ideas that other communications departments are doing. Now, I'm not saying that that's the sole end-all be-all of what we do from GAP's end, but yeah, we are influenced partially by what we see among our peers in the space. The evolution of what we do from golf media is wild to me. I just think of my role specifically with GAP and what we've been able to do from a video production concept. From when I started with a like a Dolby
Lugging that thing around.
camera, lugging that thing around, to now being able to shoot in 4K, to now being able to basically download everything digitally, get it out there to the public through YouTube, create these productions that give viewers, give GAP members, give people interested in Philadelphia golf just such a better idea of what the association does from a tournament perspective. I mean, can you imagine like the years of Jay Wood Plaid, Bill Hyman, Jay Siegel, and just having that type of golf media at your hands? I mean, it would be wild to think about. But the evolution is crazy because the Gap magazine, that's something I play a big role in, and that's evolved in terms of, as we're talking here at Riverton, we're talking about podcasting, your podcast, Slammers Weekly, the idea of having these concepts in each issue. We sort of evolved from that standpoint, Ben. And we've also evolved from a staffing perspective. I mean, I was alongside Marty in the communications department. It was just the two of us. Now we've doubled in size. We've hired 2 other assistant communications directors, Dalton Balthaser and John Iswald, who have also helped with tournament coverage, magazine writing, website. I guess the website's another part of the evolution when you think about it. GAP having a website at the infancy of the internet age to what that website was then to what it is now. I mean, that's the definition of evolution. I mean, guys can access their tee times, just go on the website. When before, that was there was a different way you learned about your tee times other than getting an email or seeing it online. So yeah, I mean, I just think I keep coming back to the word tremendous, Ben, but that's just been the evolution of media with GAP. It's evolved tremendously.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I remember the excitement of opening the GAP envelope to see your tee time.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. And that was probably all hand, not like that was automated either. It was somebody sitting there printing them out. That's
exactly
so incredible.
It was all done by hand. It's even wild to me when I think about, just think about, not just from a GAP level, but think about it from a club level and how tee times were dispersed to people way back when, like in the 1940s and the 1950s. Like if you wanted someone to play in the Philadelphia Amateur, or you wanted to get the word out about the Amateur, you couldn't go on a computer to post it online.
Yeah.
You had to handwrite everything, send letters, and communication has changed so tremendously.
That's a funny, not to inject a funny story, but the first year I played at the club championship here at Riverton, our pro, let's just say he wasn't technologically inclined. And so he mailed tee times for the club championship to the houses of who's ever playing in the club championship. And it turns out he didn't write my address properly. I did not get any mail, and I did not play in the club championship that year because I missed the time. So if that's any inclination, now we have Golf Genius and live scoring, and I'm sure that's evolved with GAP as well, just making tournaments that much more fun to cover and follow. So just my own little vignette on
Did you know, I gotta ask, did you know when the club championship was taking place, did you show up and they say, "Oh, Ben, your tee time was like 2 hours ago," or something?
Yeah, I was like 14 or 15 at the time. So I was really young, and I didn't really know the protocol. It was probably one of those things where if the letter would have showed up, I would have known, but
otherwise
I was just a kid, and like my parents really didn't know either. So if you live and you learn, right? So
that's a lost art these days, though. Honestly, letter writing.
Yeah.
No one who writes letters anymore or anything like that. Everyone communicates via email and everything's online.
I tried this Christmas and I wrote a couple of some people, and my handwriting's so bad. I don't write at all. Like everything's digital. It's like funny. It's something you don't practice. It just deteriorates to the point where it was barely legible, and now it's
completely gone.
Yeah.
See, I write for a living, so it's a little different for me, with a notebook in hand. But yeah, to your point, I mean, people just don't write a lot more unless you need to for your business. People won't go out of their way to write.
It's a lost art. I think it does when you pull it off and you do it right. It matters that much more.
Yeah,
and you get a handwritten.
100%, 100%.
So, yeah, it's cool.
But I don't think it's necessarily a lost art in the realm of golf, because I do feel that there are golfers out there who will still go the extra mile and write a letter to a superintendent. If they're at a course for the first time and they're really impressed with the conditioning of the course, yeah, I think you would go to that club's website, maybe find the superintendent's email address and shoot him an email. But I also think there's a portion of the golf population that still goes that extra step and is impressed with the conditioning. They'll say, I was a guest at your club, really great job to you and your team on the conditions. At least I think that's
inspiring, because I don't really think of doing something like that. That's really a nice touch.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that. It's just never even, I guess, in this day and age crossed my mind to do that. But yeah, that's certainly something that I'm sure those guys really appreciate. Since you've been doing this role, is there any particular moment that you would say is your favorite moment, or maybe your most defining moment? Anything stand out?
That's a great question. It's hard to pinpoint a favorite moment, because honestly, in the span of 13 plus years covering Gap Majors, there have been a lot of moments where I've said to myself, that was wild.
Yeah.
Or, I can't believe I just witnessed that.
This past Patterson Cup, right?
That just came to my mind, honestly. We were talking about it throughout covering the final day of the Patterson Cup at Lanark, and we all just kept coming back to the thought of, this is one of the most exciting, insane finishes we've witnessed in quite some time in a Gap Major. You have the weather, right? The weather playing a role down the stretch where it is pouring. Now, we're hoping to obviously finish the event, but the conditioning's kind of adding to the drama down the stretch. You have 10 guys within a shot of the lead. Like it felt like 10 players within the shot of the lead down the closing stretch at Lanark. You have so many moving parts coming down to the finish line at Lanark where, yeah, I would say that was definitely one of the more exciting moments being a part of Gap for me. I mean, that just immediately, it's funny you mentioned that, because that flashed to my mind. You have Matt Natari, who has a chance to win the tournament outright on the final hole at Lanark. The drama, like everything almost seemed like it was unfolding in slow motion for us, because our job when we're on site, we want to get ourselves in position to document how this thing's going to finish. Once we're in the position we need to be to document it, the thoughts start racing through our heads.
Right.
How are we going to present this when it's all said and done? What's going to happen here? And then there was almost a point in watching the Patterson Cup unfold where things were moving in slow motion. Like you could almost see like the raindrops slowly dripping off the visor as he's stepping up to this 4-footer to win the tournament. And then
there goes that headline.
And then your heart's racing. You're thinking to yourself, Matt Matari is going to do it. He's going to win 3 of 4 majors in Gap, because he's a past middle amateur champion. Mm-hmm. He's a past open champion. He has a 4-footer to become a Patterson Cup champion. Like the drama behind that, I would definitely have to say that moment was kind of up there for me in terms of one of my favorite moments from Gap, because that's what those are the things you look for.
Yeah.
When you're covering Gap, when your responsibility, your role with the association is to provide tournament coverage for the organization, to almost be a preserver of this organization's history in what you document, whether it's through written form or video form. In my case, you want to preserve it and kind of have the moments where 20, 30, 40 years from now, people can look back on and kind of almost feel it as they're watching it. And you're feeling it, and you want it to happen because your thoughts are running a mile a minute and like, oh man, we're going to document something here that's going to be truly special. And then for that to happen, you're not only gutted from what you conceived in your head, but you're also gutted for the player, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't help but feel for Matt when that thing just burnt the edge and was out of the hole. You just can't help but feel for the player, and we do get. I think that's part of the thrill of what we do from a communication standpoint is we get invested in what we're seeing because we have to bring it to the table and present it to the audience. We have to bring it to the table and preserve it for this organization's history.
So emotionally invested, but I also heard maybe financially invested too. I heard there's some nice little side pools running. It sounds like
there's definitely. I think it's fair to connect the dots and say there's an audience out there that does have an investment from that standpoint. I'm not going to shy away and say that outlets like DraftKings and FanDuel and PointsBet don't influence the golf landscape, even here in Philadelphia.
100%. We throw out some lines as jokes sometimes too. It's funny.
I heard the one you guys did regarding, I believe it was the Open Championship. I want to say 84, 85 is coming to mind. There was a there was a line in terms of
the highest score. We had 87 and a half.
87, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But that adds to the fun of it, right? It's all fun conversations.
Exactly. I guess, do you have a favorite person to interview maybe? If there wasn't one moment, is there one interview or person that you're just like, wow, I can't wait to talk to this guy?
Oh, that's a great question. Because man, there are a lot of cool people who I've talked to over the years. It's hard for me to pinpoint a favorite. I could tell you a handful of guys who I really have enjoyed speaking with over the years. I could tell you a few guys who I've actually started with. There's a gentleman who you've had on your podcast before, Mike Brown, who I could tell you from a conversation standpoint from when my first interview with Mike Brown took place to where my current conversations / interviews occur, it's like night and day.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. Mike is such a nice individual for being as accomplished as a player he is. It's pretty wild to me. My first interview with Mike Brown took place in 2009 when he won our middle amateur championship. I was wet behind the ears. It was my first year as a GAP staff member, so it was kind of new territory for both of us because that was his first GAP win.
Tavistock, right?
At Tavistock. Mike was very shy. He was very one sentence, two sentence answers, and then kind of move on. And he's evolved to one of my favorite guys to talk to because he is, maybe he's probably more comfortable with the Philadelphia golf environment. Maybe he's more comfortable among the amateur golf body here in Philadelphia. Maybe he's just more comfortable in himself. Who knows? But his just interviewing him, chatting with Mike has been pretty cool over the years. So he would definitely be one of my favorites. It's hard to pinpoint a favorite for me because there are just a lot of guys who I've enjoyed talking to, quite frankly, because. We like to say in the communications department is like a lot of these guys just don't have an outlet to share their story, right? They don't have an outlet to just talk about their golf game, what it means to them to accomplish this, to win this tournament, to be there. I'm actually sitting here with someone I've interviewed before and your co-host here, Ben. Ben, you'll probably recall we talked about the Junior Sportsperson of the Year honor a few years ago, and we had a great conversation. So Ben would fall in line with just a handful of just super nice guys who, when you give them the platform for an interview, that you come away with it saying, that was a cool conversation.
Tony, you didn't have to say that because I'm right here.
I can't believe he remembers the Junior Sports. I mean, that's really Tony, he doesn't mail it in, Tony. He was engaged in that conversation.
I was engaged because from what I do, I feel like I have to be. It's hard sometimes because there are guys who I've talked to where it's like I'm teetering a little bit, on that engagement standpoint, and I need to kind of reel it back in and make sure I get there. But I just part of what we do from a communications standpoint is kind of part of what you guys are trying to do with Slammers Weekly is to try to interview players, and that's honestly one of the joys I get out of what I do is the player interviews. So it's hard for me to pinpoint a favorite. I could probably come up with a list of guys who I would love to just have at a round table of favorites. It's hard to identify a single one.
There's one interview, I don't know if you did it or not, but it was within your time frame. It was a few years back at the AM at Aronimik, and it was with Conrad von Borzik. And I found
that's legendary.
That was
legendary.
like a 10-minute, and
yeah.
he's saying, I was vexed by the wind, and he said,
I'm glad you mentioned Conrad.
He's so entertaining.
He's very entertaining.
He's very engaging.
He's very conversational. Connor's a guy who, from a writing standpoint, you look to talk to because the word the language he uses when he speaks with you is so colorful that when you get it on paper, it's like, this is awesome. I love putting this out there. This really enhances what I do. Conrad, he's a great conversationalist is what I meant to say. Yeah, he's definitely one of the more colorful individuals in the Philadelphia section. It was, anytime we've gotten to speak with Conrad has been great. Conrad was actually, so my first year with Gap, Conrad won the amateur. He was the amateur champion at Stonewall, and then, he turned professional, gave it a shot after his days at the University of Virginia, and then he's one of those guys who kind of has found his way back to amateur golf, has found his way back to Gap, and has like a rejuvenated competitive spirit. So it's kind of cool. I enjoy that part of it too. Talking to the guys who have kind of reconnected with Gap after certain spots in life, because I love interviewing individuals of that mold because they have an interesting story to tell. Because if in the case of Conrad, hey, I gave it a shot, here's what I learned from it, but here's where I want to be in life, so like that kind of story I love bringing to the forefront.
It's nice to see guys find value in this stuff.
That's
outside of just being like, I want to be the best golfer, right? Like they see the relationships they can build and the camaraderie, and they're still bought in, versus the guys who try to play pro and just mail it in and just say, I'm done playing golf.
That's a huge part of it. That honestly is such a huge part of it. You hit the nail on the head. That's one of the things I enjoy most about being a part of Gap, is crossing paths with individuals who find value in playing in Gap events, who find value in the network of golfers here in Philadelphia. They find value in the interactions that they get from the experiences on the Gap circuit. Because to me, there's meaning from our end, but to know that there's meaning on the other end that goes beyond what you just said. It goes beyond, hey, I just want to be the best and that's it. Like there's meaning that goes beyond that among those guys. That's awesome. I love seeing that. I love being a part of that. And that truly is, to me, part of what makes Gap a special organization, because it's able to facilitate these kinds of things.
Well, you're looking at two guys that are batting like 15%, 20% in qualifying. Obviously, we value more than that.
But to me, the reason that you try to qualify for these events is because there's meaning behind it than just having your name on a tee sheet for a major competition. There's got to be some level of joy that you, Ben, or you, Bo, get out of being in the field at an amateur championship, being in the field at a middle amateur championship. It's not just, I'm going to be trite here when I say this, it's not just the competition, but it's also the camaraderie. You can meet someone who you never met before, who you get their cell phone number after the first round of the middle amateur, and then, a month or two later, you're getting a text from that individual asking to play in the memory guest.
100%.
Those are the kinds of things that I feel like, Gap can generate. It can generate camaraderie off the golf course. It can generate relationships off the golf course. And it's funny you mentioned the qualifying thing. Just going back to your interview point for a second, like that fits the mold of individuals I love to speak with, are guys who have given qualifying a try year in and year out, and when they finally get their big break, right, and they have a good showing in a Patterson Cup, a Middle Amateur, a major championship, whatever tournament it may be, getting the chance to bring their story to the forefront is something I enjoy. I love that.
Yep.
Because people put their time into it, right? You're not going to try to qualify for a major championship if there isn't some sort of physical or emotional investment in it. You're not just going out there to be. Maybe some guys are. Maybe I'm generalizing here, but I just don't think you're going out there to just be a guy in the field. I think there's more behind it if you're trying to play in a gap major.
Yeah, when you see that progression, it's just like golf's like life. It's whatever you put into it, it's what you get out of it. You know, the guy didn't luck his way into it. You know, he's been working at it, and it's cool to see that pay off for guys.
And listening to Slammers Weekly, there's meaning in it for you guys too, because you're so passionate about it that you want to talk about it after it happens, right? Like there's conversations that take place that you guys are bringing to the podcast forum. So to me, that tells me that there's meaning and there's passion to the experiences to want to elaborate on them when it's all said and done.
Yeah, we're a small community, but I feel like we are one of the most passionate communities.
Oh, 100%.
That's what makes it so special. There's not that many people involved, but the people that are they're all in.
Passion and Philadelphia are intertwined.
Yeah.
You cannot have one without the other, if you ask me. And that's for whatever it is that involves this city and the surrounding areas. Whether it be, I mean, just look at sports.
I know.
Look at the Phillies game last night. That stadium was outrageous after the Trey Turner walk-off winner. And this is a guy who's, he's hitting like 230? And the city's still going nuts. You know, even a couple weeks ago when he was really, really in a funk and they had that series against the Royals where he finally got some bat power. I mean, and you saw the ovation he got. He did that's the city of Philadelphia, and I actually think that translates to the golf realm, quite frankly, because I think there are a lot of golfers who just support golfers in the Philadelphia region. I think that if you come to a gap major, the guys are supportive of each other. Two guys you had on your podcast. Is Mike Brown giving Troy Vanucci the stink eye when they show up at a gap major championship together?
Right.
No, they're shaking hands. I mean, they cross paths. It doesn't matter if one's won, one's lost. There's still camaraderie and friendship and support at the end of the day, and passion.
It seems like the guys that are in it for themselves either just stop playing or just naturally get weeded out. It seems like everybody who plays is about the community, about the betterment of the players, and no one's just going out there and putting their head down and like I'm here to win and that's it. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm not whatever, right?
I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, they're either weeded out or they're just naturally in their own area, their own space, and that's it. Yeah.
Maybe we'll weed out some of those Maryland guys.
Yeah.
Maybe you got to start being a little meaner to those guys. Being a little too nice to those Baltimore guys.
But that speaks to the evolution, right? I mean, we're talking about the evolution of golf media. You asked me earlier, Ben, but the evolution of Gap. I mean, we've expanded our geographic breadth tremendously where we are in to northern Maryland with some of these clubs who are now a part of our organization. We're into central Pennsylvania. We're into Delaware. I mean, the organization itself has evolved and expanded tremendously during my time. It's crazy.
No, absolutely. This was the first year, at least that I know, that nobody from Gap won a major. It was two anthracite.
Yeah, from the core Philadelphia region. Yeah, Logan Pacheski, he's from the anthracite region. Yeah, Dave Mecca's from the anthracite region. You had Dave Mecca on your podcast.
And that's Dave and I keep in touch. We talk a decent amount, so that's another perfect example of just meeting a guy through here. And develop a relationship.
Super nice guy. He's almost like one of the golfers who, if we were to do advertising or needed like a poster child to get more of the competition from that area to come to this area when we have major, he's kind of like the flag
rallying
bearer
the troops up there.
Exactly. Almost like, hey, like we can play, let's show them we can play kind of thing. He's a good ambassador, I guess is good word for it. But yeah, to your point, I mean, him taking the Middle Amateur in May, and then Michael Crowley, Loyola University Maryland, Briarwood Golf Club member, winning the Amateur, and then the Open Championship to a familiar name in this area, Braden Shattuck. Yeah, all the major champions, no one with strictly Center City, Philadelphia roots, all from different points.
Yeah, shows how much we've grown in the last few years.
And it shows how much competition is in those areas.
Yeah,
when you think about it.
Absolutely.
My goodness. And geez. And for those guys to win under the formats they won, you got to tip your hats off. Old York Road, you were in the field at Old York Road. Greens aren't easy there.
Nah, I still have a nightmare once in a while about that place.
You came back though for the Invitational.
I did come back. Yeah, I showed back up. Yeah. I got the last laugh again. Yeah, that place is tough. But no, like you said, there's no easy way to win anything, and especially the gap stuff has gotten so hard. So any of these guys winning are really, really good players. I mean,
last year in the amateur, the lowest cut in Philadelphia amateur history.
It was like 144
it was
45
2 over.
or something. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like that just shows you the level of competition in the Philadelphia region. For those outliers, for lack of a better term, to make their names in gap major championships, there's something to be said for that.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, going off of, I know we talked about evolution, your role in the communications department. I guess zooming out to GAP as a whole, even with adding all these courses, a bunch of new land, a bunch of new courses, members, whatnot, we always gush on the podcast. We've played in events from different organizations. We always come back to gushing about the quality of GAP events. I guess if you could point to one thing about GAP, culture, people, whatever, how does GAP set the standard for how an amateur golf tournament's run?
Great question. I will speak to the communication side of that before I get to GAP in general. So we set the standard because I think that Marty Emino is the standard in golf association communications. He's, as I mentioned earlier, he built the department from the ground up, and he has a blueprint for how we handle things from a coverage standpoint. So I think when people see what's on the website after a GAP event, what they can access after a GAP event, I think that is the standard, because you're looking at all sorts of golf media that I think really people enjoy consuming when it's all said and done. You not only have a story about how the tournament ended itself, but for the major championships in particular, you have video coverage, you have sidebars, you have social media presentation throughout the major championships that keeps people updated. So I think that's what sets GAP apart from the communication standpoint. From the administration of the tournament standpoint itself, I think a large part of how GAP sets itself apart is what we do from a staffing perspective. We make sure that every staff member on site is in the right positions, doing the right things to present the tournament in the right manner. We make sure our players know where they're going, know what the procedure is. Our volunteers are a huge help to that. Our volunteers are very well trained at the beginning of each tournament season, so that when it comes time for the Middle Amateur Championship to get started, you're not arriving at the golf course and completely in the dark about how to proceed at the GAP event. We make sure the signage is there, the procedure is there, we make sure we're visible on the golf tournament, during the golf tournament, so that if you have a rules issue or you have an issue finding a golf ball, we may not have a spotter on the course, but there probably isn't a volunteer or staff member who's too far away from you where you could flag someone down and call them over. It's not show up to a golf tournament and then the people running the golf tournament are invisible. I think what sets GAP apart is that we're very visible during each event we do.
Yeah, I was just at an event down in West Virginia, and it's like talk about night and day between our association and Philly. I mean, geez, it was like they had a sign-up sheet on the day before, like you could just like a scratch paper sign-up sheet to go ahead and
to me that's a huge part
and guys just showing up, and it's like I was actually there when the guy was giving the instructions. I was there earlier, and the guy's just like, all right, you're Jimmy, so you're on hole 3, and the guy's like, all right, and he just drives out. It's like, whatever. It was nice they volunteered, but like you said, you could see the difference in what you guys do versus some of these other associations, and it certainly shows in the finished product.
That's a huge part of it. It's visibility, right? A lot of what GAP does as an organization is what I like to think of as customer service, quite frankly. The golfer who's playing in a GAP tournament can be viewed as a customer. So you want to make sure that individual is treated as best as possible. And you want to make sure that individual comes away from the event having a good experience.
Yeah, ultimately you guys are a business and you're offering a service, right?
Yeah.
And if you view it that way, then, which like you've shown, you clearly do,
We don't
people
want
appreciate it.
Yeah, we don't want people slamming their trunks afterwards because they're disappointed with GAP. Maybe the trunk slam is in relation to how that particular person played that day,
right,
or a little bit of a personal frustration. But we don't want it tied to what they experienced during a GAP event.
I like how you plug that in there.
I had to do it.
Yeah, I love it. I don't know if whether you had it queued up or not. It was good. For being the GAP Media, or the head of GAP Media, or the face of GAP Media, do you?
You could say voice of GAP.
Voice, you like voice?
I may get crap if I'm deemed the head
I don't want to say
head of GAP Media by Slammers Weekly. The voice of GAP is safe because that's
Yeah, I don't want to be falsely advertising your title, but do you get any good fringe benefits in the area? I mean, maybe some of them you can tell us, some of us you can't, but...
You may be surprised by this answer, but Bo, I have played 0 rounds of golf here in 2023.
Oh, Jesus, man.
No, you know what?
I know you're busy, but that busy? You can't go out for 9?
It's
That's painful.
Well, there's a different side to my story that I don't know if your audience would want to listen to, but in terms of like fringe benefits and stuff like that, I don't. I could put, just based on the network, I could probably put in a call saying, hey, I'm looking to get out for 9, I'm looking to get out here, I'm looking to get out there. That's just from years of building up relationships, networking, and so forth. So those avenues could be explored. But in terms of anything else like that, I don't know if this would count as a fringe benefit, but being with the communications department, for example, when the BMW Championship was at Wilmington Country Club last year, what we do, we do a lot of golf media. So, we could basically cover the BMW Championship in our backyard, highlighting Wilmington Country Club. So that... I don't know if that would classify as like a fringe benefit. That's more of us having the opportunity to highlight one of GAP's member clubs hosting a PGA Tour event. So I guess maybe that kind of goes hand in hand, kind of when these national and prestigious events come to the Philadelphia area, we kind of have an opportunity to sort of be inside the ropes and to highlight, to interview players. For example, like when the U.S. Open was here in 2013, I had a great opportunity to work with the USGA communications team and provide some stories for the USGA website during the U.S. Open in Marion Week. So I don't know if you would classify that as a fringe benefit, but that was definitely an opportunity that I was afforded based on my role with GAP. I was afforded the opportunity to work with the USGA communications and do some cool coverage of the U.S. Open. And don't forget, Brandon Matthews was an alternate that year for the U.S. Open in 2013. So he was on the range hoping for a chance to get in. So I got to interview Brandon and do a story and do a story for their website about it. So that was kind of like a unique aspect of what we do.
What days were longer, those U.S. Open days or the Patterson Cup a couple weeks ago? How long do your days look? I assume you have to put in some 18-hour days.
We do. We do. So we're burning the midnight oil, let's just say, because we're a good 2-3 hours once the tournament is all said and done, doing what we need to do before we leave a site. So some events don't end until close to darkness, sometimes during the summer. So we put in long days. There have been days where I've left the club at like 11 o'clock, 11:30, midnight. There are days when we know it's going to be a long day, so we just kind of stay, like for the amateur, for example, if we're traveling far for the amateur, then we'll stay overnight, like after the first day. just because it's an early wake up call and a late bedtime call, so it doesn't make sense logistically to drive X amount of hours back home. But yeah, but that's it comes with the territory. We want to make sure what we do, we're doing responsibly, we're doing credibly, and we're doing so that it's presentable in the end. Lots of coffees on those days. Let's just put it that way. Maybe you could bring me a Starbucks the next Gap event, like you did for Ben today.
If I can get a tea time, sure. That's a big if. I wouldn't bank on it. Get somebody who's exempt to bring your coffee. So, being the voice of Gap, I think the thing you may be most famous for, you may not know this, but is your sign-off line. And I've seen multiple people do impersonations of it.
You're 100% right. 100% right.
Maybe even Ben and I have, honestly. I have.
That's one of my calling cards. It is one of my calling cards, and I embrace it.
How long did you? How long did it take you to craft that? Was that a lot of time in the mirror? Or?
The thing about me is it's just the way I'm wired. It's the way my mind works. I am a huge puns person. I love puns. You'd be hard pressed to find a pun out there that doesn't generate a laugh out of me. I'm like a puns guy. I'm a dad jokes guy. I'm an alliteration guy. I have a lot of these goofy language things that are just naturally wired into me. So when I started with Gap, and video production became a part of my responsibilities, I noticed that my predecessor had a sign-off for all the productions he put out there. I wanted to distinguish a little bit. I didn't want to just be plain Jane when doing an outro. So the rhyme scheme just fit with my name, the Tony. The Tony and the TV, it just fit.
And I wanted to hear this live, so I'm glad I got this. I was going to make you do a whole rendition of it, but I'm glad we got a little dose.
It just fit. It just fit from the get-go. And I started it. I stayed with it. Fortunately, I wasn't reprimanded or fired for doing it.
It's more of like a ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Exactly. 100%. 100%.
Worst case, they say, Tony, cut that out.
Exactly. Worst case scenario, we're in the digital age where I could just cut it out and try something new. And it's funny. I start my first year. I started my first year. The first year I started doing video for Gap, I started with that, and I have just stuck to my guns with it. I have not been asked to change it. If I were asked to change it, I'd be a little sad. I'd be a little heartbroken because I feel like it's become a part of my fabric.
Brand, yeah.
Within Gap. But no, it's something I've started with, and I've stuck with it all these years. And I honestly get a kick out of it when guys come up to me and instead of, "Hey Tony, how's it going? Hey, how are you today?" It's Tony Regina. That's so fun. I love when I get that. So we conducted U.S. mid-amateur qualifying last week at Woodford Country Club, and I'm doing what we do from a communication standpoint. I'm out on the golf course, I'm visible, I'm photographing the event, I'm documenting the event. I show up to a group, and I'm sure you know Chris Alt. He's in the group, Yardley Country Club member, big Gap supporter, past Pennsylvania amateur champion. The moment he's approaching the green and sees me, it's not, "Hey Tony," it's Tony Regina. Like, that's a recent example. Like, even as recent as last week being at a Gap event, I get it.
You might even get a little bit more now.
I might even get a little bit.
Might get sick of it. Be careful what you hear.
I will never grow tired of it because it always generates a smile. It's cool. Because honestly, but what that tells me is people are watching what we're putting out, right? People are checking out the videos that Gap does. People are checking out the video productions that I'm fortunate enough to have my name attached to. And to me, I love it. That speaks volumes as to where this organization is at in 2023, where people are enjoying what we're able to provide. It's awesome.
And it leads into my last question. Are there any enhancements or anything in the future from a media perspective that you guys have?
We may get into podcasting.
There you go.
That's something we've talked about. We've talked about podcasting. Like we were talking about earlier, it's become such a huge market in today's world. In today's tech-driven world, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't listen to at least one podcast, right? So it's something we've always bandied about. It's just hard to create an identity in this space. It's just hard to find your own voice. And there are so many other voices out there. Credit to you guys for going on this podcast adventure and bringing the Philadelphia golf scene to the microphones in podcast form. But golf podcasting alone, you could type in golf podcasts on Google Podcasts or Spotify and look how many returns you'll get. So back to your question, that's one thing we've kind of bandied about. That may be an evolution point for us in the future. I say it year in and year out. I always want to evolve from a video production standpoint. I want to take it beyond what we do from a tournament coverage standpoint and do more features, conversations, things of that nature. We've taken steps in that direction over the last few years. I want to continue to grow in beyond tournament coverage and beyond profile this, profile that kind of thing.
How about a featured hole for each tournament, like just video one green or something? I think would be really neat for people at home to just, because you would get a lot of engagement from friends like, oh, he's coming through, or family, and then also just at work it would be cool just to see, I don't know, the 18th green somewhere, or a par 3 with has water on it, and see guys dunking balls and stuff.
There's we are.
You could probably get that sponsored by somebody, some splash cam or.
So one of the things we started this year that I thought really was well received, and that we're going to continue with it next year, is the Final 3.
Yeah,
that
is cool.
I
watched those.
Yeah, I thought all of them. I thought that kind of came out well and was well received by the Philadelphia golf scene. Is we take an individual and have them talk through the final 3 holes of the upcoming major host site. So ideas like that, concepts like that kind of not just enhance what we do from GAP standpoint, but just would be attractive and of interest to any golfer in the Philadelphia region. That's something we're always thinking about. What would not only be of interest to the GAP tournament player, but what would also be of interest to the GAP member? What would also be of interest to Joe golfer who can only find time in golf for his life on the weekends? Like how do we hit these different audiences from what we do from a communication standpoint, from what we do from a golf media standpoint? And the Final 3 definitely hit a good audience with the major competitors, not just guys who are in the event, but guys who are just interested in GAP events. I think people thought it was pretty cool that Mike Brown was talking us through the final 3 holes at Lookaway in advance of the Open Championship being there. So creative concepts like that are something we're going to look for in the future.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed those. It was cool, especially to see on holes where you weren't 100% sure what the guy would hit there.
Exactly.
Like 18th Atlanta, or the 18th at Lookaway. Like some guys lead driver up the right, other guy Brown hits a 3-wood. So it's cool to see how they play that.
Yeah, and for if you were in the Open Championship field and you had never been to Lookaway, you would probably think that 18 from the tee box may be a little visually intimidating based on what you see in front of you, but to have Mike Brown kind of talk you through it kind of just gives you a different perspective on how the hole is. If you hadn't never been on the property before, you could kind of see, oh, okay, it's not as visually intimidating as I may have. Not to say it's not an intimidating hole, but like for any newcomer who sets foot on that tee box, you kind of get a different idea of what that hole's
you feel like you're adding some value there too.
Exactly.
Not only just from an entertainment perspective, but also from a course knowledge
Exactly.
It just comes down to context, right? It's like the same thing going back to your point with Matt Matare and the context of him winning 2 majors before and going for a 3rd, right?
Yeah.
Makes a lot more gravitas, right, than someone maybe a no-name from wherever just going for his first, right?
Yeah.
And it's a lot of your job, right, with the GAP is building up that context, whether on a course or a player or building up persona, stuff like that.
Right.
And so I think that's what GAP does an amazing job of, just identifying the great courses, the great champions, the great people. So
that's something we take great pride in. And I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't at a tournament and thoughts weren't racing through my head of how are we going to paint this picture, how are we going to bring this to the public, how are we going to preserve this moment for future generations to look back on and see how are we going to frame this. Like, you want to make sure that 20, 30, 40 years from now, people look back and get an idea of who the champion was, you know, what their story was and why it was relevant to the Philadelphia golf scene. Like, for example, like there was a member here at Riverton, Beetle Bernie.
Yeah.
Like, he was one of the great amateur players decades ago. He was like a mainstay on the Philadelphia golf circuit. Like I would want to know what his story was, you know? So I kind of think about it in those terms of like people years from now, they would probably want to know what Jeff Osberg's story was. They would probably want to know what Mike Brown's story was.
Once the Mike Brown invitation, once there's like a tournament named after Mike Brown Cup. Who the hell's this Mike Brown guy?
And you guys see that at the clubs, right? Like,
even like the William Hinman, we see the names of the guys, and it would be cool to
know who they are.
To know what they outside of just a little newspaper blurb or something.
Exactly.
It would be cool to see a video. It'd be cool to put a face to the name.
Exactly.
Stuff like that.
Exactly.
So, watch their swing and see like, oh, this is how William Hinman used to play the final 3 holes at Huntington Valley back in the 20s, right? Like, it would be cool to see that. Right?
Exactly. That's kind of like the mindset we have. Like, it would be cool for people to look back on that stuff and see like, oh, I know Jeff Osberg was a Gap Grand Slam champion, but hey, go and watch. You have video to go watch of, what he did to earn that distinction,
I'd be lying if I didn't say I went down YouTube rabbit holes late at night and I'm watching the 07 Philly Open recap. I think we've all done it.
Rabbit holes, yeah.
I mean, when you see that random view click in from the one from 15 years ago, probably me.
That's the beauty of where we're at in today's world. And who knows where we're going to be like 20, 30 years from now with that kind of stuff. I mean, I can't imagine something like YouTube going away. Maybe it's just exists in a different form, but I can't imagine where people wouldn't have access to that kind of stuff at their fingertips. And that's the way we kind of look at it. If people years from now have access to it at their fingertips, what are we going to want to show them? What are they going to want to see?
Yeah.
Are they going to want to see a 30-second spot of a player sharing a thought on winning a tournament and like 2 clips of him sinking a putt and that's it? Or are they going to want to see more, like a 2 to 3 minute piece of him sharing insights and analyzing, what he did on the 18th hole to set himself up for the winning birdie. So like that sort of thing is what goes through our collective heads as we're trying to present.
Timeless element.
Exactly.
As well. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Totally get it.
Because we're engaged and we want people to be engaged.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, we really appreciate your time today, Tony.
No, this is new territory for me. Yeah. I'm used to being the one asking the questions, so this is new to me.
I felt like you have a lot in there. There's a lot pent up. I feel like you've been waiting to be interviewed for a while.
There was some pent up. Hey, being in the communications field, you talk for a living, so
we enjoyed it. You were awesome. Yeah, you made it. Our job's so easy. Sometimes, like you said, with some people, it's really pulling teeth. You're like, how am I going to get an hour of this guy? Out of this guy?
Yeah.
Being fellow talkers, we get it. So hopefully next time you're interviewing one of us, not about podcasting, but about something we actually, competitive golf. I think down the road it's going to happen at some point. It might be.
You won the club championship here.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah.
Semifinals in the New Jersey 4-ball.
Yeah, we're getting there, I don't know. I'm thinking way down the line for that. I'm thinking maybe the Brewer Cup or something. Like 25 years from now.
Well, also around with how good Gap's gotten. I mean, me and Bo always talk about like, the cuts in these qualifiers used to be 77, now they're 74. And it's like that's our game, we haven't gotten 3 shots better in that time. So we better get going.
That's great.
But it's funny you mentioned the Brewer Cup, and if you don't mind, I'll share this with you guys.
Sure.
I think that's one of the beauties of GAP is the senior opportunities that GAP affords. I mean, look at a guy like Chip Lutz and what he's accomplished at the senior level, like this late in his golf career. Like there is an outlet through GAP where guys who are that age, if they still have that competitive fire within, they could come to GAP. They come to GAP and have an outlet for that. You know, like they could compete at that level. You'll hear guys who are in their late 30s, early 40s say like, "Oh, another year closer to the GAP senior division." Like,
start getting that range, that 40 to 45.
Exactly.
You start getting a little discouraged with guys hitting the 40 yards past you, and you're not ready for the 6,300 yard courses.
And some of those comments may be offhanded, like jokingly, but there probably is a bit of sincerity to it as well, where they say like, "Hey, there's a new lease on life here, and there's still just as much competition among the GAP senior circuit as there is among the amateur circuit where the cut's 2 over. There's still great players in the senior division that guys are looking forward to being a part of and kind of making their mark on that level. So I think that speaks to the beauty of golf in this region, that whatever age you are, there's still an outlet for you to compete.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a continuum. It's like a lifelong pursuit, a lifelong journey.
Exactly.
That's what keeps us coming back.
Exactly.
We're already on the senior tour regimen at 33 and 25. That's our only hope. So
Hey, don't sell yourself short on the mid-am stuff. The mid-am's still always a good outlet.
It's true. It's true. Well, thanks again, Tony.
Yeah, it's been a lot of
appreciate
fun.
It was awesome, and if you ever need any podcasting tips, not from how to speak, because you're clearly great at that, more just technical stuff. we've wasted countless hours, so hit us up.
I know where to go for it. I'll say this. So when Slammers Weekly, when it goes global, and you guys are out there with FanDuel and MeUndies and whatever else as sponsors as of the podcast, just throwing a little thank you mention. Yeah, when you guys go global and are huge, when it's No Laying Up and Slammers Weekly head to head for 1 and 2 on the Spotify list, just throw a little mention to this.
Throw a little tone out there.
It was nice to be. Yeah.
Well, that would mean we have to talk about something outside of Philly golf, and we would lose our identity. There's only about 200 people that care about Philly golf, according to our viewer numbers.
Data analytics.
Yeah, so we have to talk about Scotty Scheffler and those guys a little bit more, which we don't really care about at this point. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But
it's crazy how good he could be if he could putt.
Oh man, it's painful to watch, man. But
it is painful to watch. But man, he strikes the ball so well. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you mentioned Scotty. Had to throw a quick Scotty insight there. I just think he would be. He's phenomenal to watch now. But man, I think
he'll figure it out at some point. I mean, geez, you can only putt that bad for so long and be coordinated. You know, right? Like at some point, I think he's got to break through.
Yeah.
Right. Like
catch one feel.
Because he wasn't that bad of a putter. When he first started winning, his putting was much better than it is now. Yeah.
Now it's just horrific.
It's just so magnified now, right? Because he's in the spotlight every week, and he's
hitting it to 10 feet of every hole, right?
I know they were saying there's like a 3-putt statistic. It's like, well, how often does the guy have 50 footers? Like, never. He either hits it to 20 with inside 20 feet, or just misses the green and pitches up to like what he's not pulling irons, like 9 irons at 25 yards. Yeah.
You
it's a good problem to have. Yeah. Ben and I are flippers of the club. So we have these conversations late at night about who's flipping it less and how we can flip it less, and we're always trying to find a less flippy feel. Yeah.
Can a flipper be a slammer?
Oh yeah.
I think probably a lot of slammers are flippers. That usually equates to 82s, which equates to you slamming a truck. Yeah, there's definitely some overlap between
yeah, this was fun. I appreciate you guys having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.